A young photographer named John had always had a fascination with old things. He sought a mystical connection with the past in them, as if each item carried a hidden story. One day, while strolling through a flea market on the outskirts of the city, John noticed something strange. On a table cluttered with old photographs, albums, and books lay a dusty leather box, clearly ancient, cracked, and stained by time. Out of curiosity, he stepped closer and opened it. Inside was an old camera with a mechanical shutter, apparently from the past century. The seller, an elderly man with a grim face, sat nearby, watching John's every move intently. "What kind of camera is this?" John asked, trying not to reveal too much interest. "An old one," the seller replied calmly. "They don't make these anymore. Want it? I'm selling it for a pittance." John thought, for such a relic, it was worth paying a few hundred rubles. He reached for his wallet, and upon receiving the camera, he immediately felt a chill run down his spine. As if something inside him was subconsciously screaming, "Don't touch this!" But curiosity won, and he hurried home to check out his new find. Returning to his small apartment, John immediately set the camera on a tripod. It seemed massive and heavy, as if it contained something more than just mechanisms. John checked the film compartment. To his surprise, there was already an old reel inside, half used. "I wonder what's on these frames," he thought. He decided to take a few shots on the remaining film. John photographed the street, random passersby, and even himself in the mirror. When the film was finished, he took it to the nearest photo lab. A few hours later, he was handed a packet of developed photographs. The photos looked strange. In the first one, there was a man John didn't remember. It was a stranger, standing at a traffic light. But something about his figure was unnatural. Distorted facial contours, as if someone or something was pulling at him from the inside. In the second frame, a passerby looked as if something had exploded next to him at the moment the shot was taken, though John knew for sure that nothing of the sort had happened. In the third photograph was John himself. And at that moment, John's heart sank. His face in the photograph was altered. One eye looked as if it had been ripped out, and black blood was flowing from his mouth. John stared at the photo in shock, unable to understand what was happening. Maybe it's film defects? He tried to reassure himself, but the feeling of inner dread only intensified. A few days later, John heard about a strange incident on the news. The man who appeared in the first photograph had been found dead. His body was discovered in a car parked near the spot where John had taken the picture. The death occurred under suspicious circumstances that the police could not explain. Coincidence, John told himself. However, a couple of days later, he found out that the person in the other photograph had also died. Witnesses reported that the man had been hit by a car, but the strange thing was that his face was mutilated in the same way as in the photograph. John felt unwell. He immediately understood that the camera somehow predicted, or maybe even caused death. He tried not to think about his own photograph, but it kept resurfacing in his mind as a warning. John stayed at home for several days. He decided that he would never use the camera again, but the idea of getting rid of it scared him even more. What if the camera brings harm to the next owner? One night, John heard a strange noise coming from the hallway. Someone, or something, was approaching his door. John grabbed the camera and turned on the flash. He felt something invisible come closer to him. His fingers moved on their own, pressing the shutter release. The flash lit up the room, and for a split second he saw a shadow that he couldn't explain. The next morning, he developed the last frame. The photograph showed his own body. Lying on the floor, with black eyes and a bloody smile on his distorted face, the camera had predicted his death. John realized that there was no escape. Every photograph was a death sentence. John became paranoid. He stopped sleeping and eating, fearing every step. He was sure that death would come for him, just as it had for the others. His own photograph became more and more obsessive by the minute. He tried to burn the camera, but it wouldn't yield to the flames. The metal wouldn't melt, and even the leather wouldn't catch fire. John was in despair. He realized that this camera was not of this world. The next morning, he was found dead in his apartment. Everything looked as if John had died of a heart attack, but on his face was that same eerie, bloody smile from the last photograph. The camera lay nearby, a witness to his final moments. The only one who dared to take the camera after John's death was the same elderly vendor from the flea market. He carefully wiped off the dust and put it back on the shelf, waiting for the next curious photographer. Thus, old things can carry not only history, but also tragedy capable of destroying those who dare to interfere with their secrets.